Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
Many of you have been writing to me asking that I move away, at least for a while, give you a respite from coronavirus and China. You know what? Even I am desperate for that respite because both of those have not been good news stories. And I'd rather see some good news or something different. But what happens is that I am a prisoner of the news cycle, as most of us are in all news media organizations. So what I'm trying to do today is I'm trying to get the best of both worlds. I am trying to do something new and yet stay within the news cycle. So what do we talk about today? We talk about India's Central Armed Police Forces, sometimes broadly and erroneously described as India's paramilitary forces. And the reason we talk about that right now, and the reason I said I stay within the news cycle, is that as we know that yesterday there was a discussion and now this is an active proposal that once again the India-China border, particularly in Ladakh, should be left to be patrolled by Indo-Tibetan Border Police, ITBP, which is one of our Central Armed Police Forces. Mind you, that is different from a paramilitary force, and I will try and explain to you the difference in just a couple of minutes. So, ITBP is what has been raised to protect or guard or to look after border security on a day-to-day basis or border management along with China. So, all the borders with China essentially are the responsibility of Indo-Tibetan Border Police, not active army. What's happened over the past many years is that the army and ITBP have been running joint patrols. Now what happens there is that ITBP is a border police force. So they know how to manage trouble at the border because they know the management at the border. The army is trained to fight to defend every inch of the territory. So as long as there are two border forces from both sides patrolling, they also build an equation over time. They know the rules, they know the protocols. For example, if you see the India-Pakistan border, it is the BSF on the Indian side and Rangers on the Pakistani side. So these are border troopers, classical border troopers. ITBP is a force in that category. Now, while we talk about ITBP, we also look at what is this entire lot of this panoply of acronyms that you keep hearing: ITBP, SSB, BSF, CRPF, SFF, SPG, NSG, CISF, and I may be forgetting the odd one, Assam Rifles or AR, but I will come to all of them. Now, if you look at just a dumb comparison of the size of uniformed armies in the world, uniformed land armies in the world, then the largest obviously is China. It's about 1.6 million people right now. It used to be 2.1 million just about a few years ago. They have now downsized heavily. They've invested in technology, they've invested in firepower, mobility, and they've reduced their manpower and they're reducing it further. India has the second largest manpower for a land army, that is 1.2 million. The Americans are about the third, with just over a million depending on how you count their reserves. And surprisingly, the fourth then is North Korea, which is almost a million people in their land army. Now that may be GK aside, but the reason I am mentioning it today is a simple one, because I am trying to put in perspective what India's Central Armed Police Forces and paramilitary forces are like. India's Central Armed Police Forces, that is CRPF, BSF, Assam Rifles, ITBP, CISF, NSG, SPG, SSB, if you put them all together, they are more than a million people. So actually, India at this point has, in a way, the second largest land army in the world and the third largest land army in the world. Because this is not an army, this is also not a paramilitary force, but these are armed police people in uniform. It's a very large force. So I sometimes say that India's defense minister may command the second largest army in the world, but India's home minister commands the third largest army in the world. So that is this big force available for India. And if you look at any comparison of military power, look at military balance, etc., these people are counted. So it's important for us to understand who these are, where these people are deployed, what do they do, how much do they cost, what is their role, are they being utilized optimally, or are they also misused or wasted, are they equipped all right, and are they all performing the role they are supposed to perform. So let me quickly go over with the list with you and tell you a little bit of history and some important highlights about each one. And this is thanks to my young colleague Unnati Sharma, who's put this research together, that I can talk more authoritatively with some figures, and I will talk a little bit from my experience. So the biggest of all and the big daddy of all, Central Armed Police Forces. Now once again, Central Armed Police Force is different from a paramilitary force. A paramilitary force is almost like the army. Its equipment, its training, its operational role. So among all of these, the only force that comes close to being called a paramilitary force is Assam Rifles, which operates in the northeast, and I will come to you. The other one, which is not technically a paramilitary force, but you could call a paramilitary force, is a part of the army, in fact, that is Rashtriya Rifles. So the battalions of Rashtriya Rifles have scaled down weaponry and operational role, which is like a paramilitary. So I am just saying this to put this in perspective for you. So the biggest of these is CRPF, Central Reserve Police Force. You see them all the time. You've all heard the joke that they have about themselves. They call themselves Chalte Raho Pyare because they're constantly on the move from one place to the other. In fact, a former DG, Mr. TGL Iyer of CRPF, who I used to know well in the northeast, he once even had a marching song composed called Chalte Raho Pyare. So they also know how to laugh at themselves. They keep the country together in all kinds of situations everywhere. They are today quite strong. They are 3 lakh strong with 243 oversized battalions. 3 lakh strong. This one Central Reserve Police Force, that, and we always say 50 company udhar ja raha hai, 100 company udhar ja raha hai, we are short of central forces. Every state wants central forces. Now this has a very interesting history. From where did the name CRPF come in? So in British times, this force was set up in 1939 by the British. In 1936, the Congress Party, AICC, had its Madras session, and there they passed a strong resolution which caused protests in many princely states in India. Now princely states were not able to handle those protests with their police forces, or maybe many were not inclined to do so. So the British government set up a central or a federal police force called Crown Representation Police Force. CRP force got added subsequently. Now what happens when India becomes free? Everything was mostly retained, but some things had to change their names. Many things retained their names, but some things had to change their names. So you could not have a Crown Representation Police Force. At the same time, if you change the name too much, then you will have to change all the badges, all the uniforms, all the epaulets, and all the stationery, signboards, everything. So a simple solution was found. Bharat Sarkar ingenuity, what was Crown became Central. So CRPF remained, CRP remained, CRP, all that other tamjam was prevented. In fact, you want to see more examples of that. There are many more. I will just mention one as an aside. In Dehradun, there is this famous military school called Rashtriya Indian Military College. Its graduates are called Rimkolians. It's a feeder institution for India's military academies. Remember that this used to be called Prince of Wales Royal Indian Military College. So once again, the British left, the royalty left. There was, if you could find a way of changing the name without having to change the stationery and the badges and everything and all the livery, then that way was found. So what was royal became Rashtriya. So there is ingenuity like that. Now CRPF costs today about 2,700 crores. In fact, its currently listed budget is 26,259 crores. So it's 26,259 crores, just the budget of the CRPF. It has also produced sub-specialist forces within itself. So for Naxalite areas, it has Cobra, or what is called as Commando Battalion for Resolute Action. So these Cobra battalions are in the vanguard of the CRPF in the fight against Maoists in East Central India. They inflict a lot of casualties. They're very effective. They also suffer a lot of casualties. In fact, over many years, it is India's Central Armed Forces and police forces who've suffered even more casualties fighting enemies of the state or the nation than even the regular Indian army. So this is quite a, this was set up to control riots, to control crowds in the course of time. However, it has become a multi-role force which is also used for counter-insurgency of a kind in the Maoist area. And then you find it used in various different places. It's important to remember that among the early casualties in the troubles with China in 1959, the Konka La incident in Ladakh, not far from the Hot Springs area, Hot Springs Gogra area, where currently we've seen trouble. The patrol that was ambushed and which suffered casualties was a CRPF patrol. That's why 20th October is observed all over India as the National Police Memorial Day. In fact, there is a beautiful very touching National Police Memorial set up in Lutyens, Delhi, not far from from Chanakyapuri, near the Circular Road area. If you're in Delhi at some point, go look it up. Every weekend in the evening, they have parades and band performance by paramilitary forces. So, CRPF over time became among the world's most efficient riot control forces. And I cannot help telling you this story, but there was a time when Mr. Bhuta Singh, when he was Home Minister of India, he was caught in a big controversy. He was caught in a big controversy because his sons were involved in some businesses that had led to a lot of stink. I think they were running a taxi service which had all its cars or most of its cars hired by a public sector airline then called Vayudut, which later shut down. And that scandal was blown up, and we in fact broke it in India Today magazine. And there was another scandal of when Mr. Bhuta Singh is supposed to have done something funny with the secret funds given to him for rebuilding the Golden Temple in Amritsar after Operation Blue Star. So when the stories were being done, once he invited me and my editor then, Arun Puri, for dinner to explain his side of the story, and his sons were there. So while he explained his side of the story, he also told us a story about CRPF which stays with me. He said Mr. Shevardnadze had visited India. Shevardnadze, as we know, was a Soviet politician, a minister who then became a leader of Georgia because he was a Georgian. And this is when Georgia was having its separatist impulse, and there were protests on the streets. And when the first protests came out, the Soviet forces used poison gas against them. They brought out tanks and they used poison gas because they didn't know how to deal with the crowd. So he said that I hosted Shevardnadze for dinner, and there he asked me, he said, how do you handle these protests in India by hundreds of thousands of people? We had a few thousand people come out in Georgia and our people used poison gas. How do you deal with these people? So Bhuta Singh said, "Main kya ji," in Punjabi he said, Your Excellency, je tusi kende ho, in case you want it, I can send you a few battalions of CRPF. Because what is the CRPF? It's a danda wielding force, it's a danda wielding, tear gas wielding force. It can control riots. So in fact, I was thinking of that story just the other day when the Americans were having this trouble dealing with crowds after the George Floyd murder. Because I heard in Washington DC, when the protests came up, they even issued bayonets to their soldiers. You cannot fight a crowd with bayonets. Now, of course, CRPF has gone through many roles, and CRPF has multiple roles now. It also uses pellets in places. It also uses machine guns in places, but it is lightly armed, still essentially a danda wielding, a lathi wielding force. But 3 lakh people. So that is CRPF. Then you come to the second biggest force, that is BSF. Once again, if you know our country, we are our country, and I was going to write this in my national interest this week, but we always wake up after the event. So 1965 war with Pakistan took place at a time when all our borders were manned by state armed police forces. So Punjab border with Pakistan, for example, was manned by Punjab Armed Police. Similarly, Gujarat border was manned by either Gujarat Special Reserve Police or by CRPF. And it was found, and remember, the first trouble in 65 began much before the war in September. It began in April with the Kutch conflict. And even then it was noticed that these state police forces were not good enough. They were not strong enough, and they were not equipped and trained enough to protect the border. So there was need for a specialized border security force. So that's how a force called Border Security Force came into being 2 months after the 65 war. So 1st December 1965, Border Security Force was founded. It was founded by visionaries. K.F. Rustamji became its first Director General, and other dadas of Indian police like Ashwini Kumar and others got involved. And initially, BSF was composed of battalions of state armed police forces which were absorbed in the BSF, and then it continued growing, and now it has grown into a force of 186 battalions of 2,43,000 people. In fact, the exact number is 2,43,161. I am not telling you any secret. These are all data presented in Parliament, and in fact you want to see more of it in detail, and in fact that's where I got the idea to talk about CAPFs also today. American Chicago University academic Paul Staniland shared some of the Rajya Sabha committee reports on the state of India's paramilitary forces last night, and I am sharing those with you, so you can take a look at those. So BSF budget of 21,000 crores, precisely at this point 20,952 crores. Is this a paramilitary force? Sort of, but not fully. It's still a border management force. It has a few mortars and a few machine guns, but essentially still a border management force. But it has a dual role, and the dual role is, in case of a war, it provides a second line of defense to the army. It also provides defense to the areas which may not be under direct attack from the enemy, so kind of holding operation there to free up the army for more important areas. So it works very closely with the army, but it's also been used over many other roles in many other places. Then how did ITBP came in? We talked about ITBP. Now again, one of those stories that we wake up when there is a crisis. 20th October 1962, the war with the Chinese began. You can see that already a talk must have been in the works that there should be a specialized force manning this border. And if so, what do you call that border? Until then, India did not accept the One China policy. Tibet was an autonomous region of China, etc., etc. It was very complicated. Until 2003, when Atal Bihari Vajpayee accepted the One China policy, and the Chinese in return accepted Sikkim as a part of India. Sikkim, as you know, became a part of India in 1975 through a referendum, and the Chinese had not yet accepted that, but they accepted that. So that quid pro quo happened between Vajpayee and the Chinese. But in 1962, it was not like that. So this force was imagined by Jawaharlal Nehru and people around him. I presume Gobind Ballabh Pant, who was Home Minister, quite hawkish, also from Uttarakhand, so he knew the borders, and Bholanath Malik, who was Jawaharlal Nehru's intelligence czar. There was no RAW then. He was the head of everything he surveyed. He was very powerful, probably the most powerful intelligence chief in India's history. Now, they set up this new force on 24th of October 1962, when the war had just started, called Indo-Tibetan, not China, Indo-Tibetan Border Police, only with 4 battalions. Over time, now this is also grown. So ITBP now is 89,433, nearly 90,000 people in 60 battalions, budget of 6,522 crores. So what does ITBP do? It manages all of the India-China border, Ladakh, Arunachal, Uttarakhand, Himachal. All of the India-China border is ITBP's responsibility. In many areas, army people go along with ITBP and run joint patrols. In Ladakh, that is the idea from both sides, India and China, that henceforth patrolling will be left to bordermen because they know each other and they know the drills on the border and they don't feel pressure to fight for every inch all the time. They also know how to resolve issues the other way. Plus, they are lightly armed because the idea that your army will go there, regular army will go there, but they will either not be carrying their arms or their magazines will not be in their rifles and the rifles will be upside down and they will not fire is an anathema. So that is now being corrected. So that is ITBP, again a very powerful, strong force and very specialized in their training for high altitude areas. That's why you find ITBP doing very well with mountaineering expeditions. Then you have the other big force, SSB, which is today called Sashastra Seema Bal. As SSB was set up, it was set up as Special Services Bureau. It was a shadowy force set up under RAW. Idea was to lightly arm villagers and nationalistic loyal people in border areas, essentially with China, which could not be defended all the time. So in case there was an infiltration or in case the regular army had to withdraw, because that was the experience of 1962, they could carry out guerrilla operations or harassment operations. Over time, this role has changed because that role is not needed anymore. So SSB has also grown into a border security force now, quite powerful, 97,000 people, 73 battalions, a budget of 6,000 crore plus, and they guard the borders with Nepal, Bhutan, and also help with internal security in many areas. In fact, during the elections, we keep running into Jawans from Special Security, Sashastra Seema Bal, the former Special Security Bureau, all the time. So once again, the budget of 6,600 crores. Then you have some more. There is NDRF, National Disaster Rescue Force, that is 2,500 crores. 12 battalions, they are essentially drawn from other paramilitary forces. Their budget is another 13,000 crores. Central Armed Police Forces, in terms of the classical definition, cost about 78,000 crores. But if you add all the rest, that is SPG, NST, NDRF, then it's almost 1 lakh crores, a trillion rupees. But when you see paramilitary forces, there is also a couple more that we don't talk so much about. There is, for example, NSG, National Security Guards, the Black Cat Commandos, and once again, everything comes from a lesson learned during a crisis. This lesson was learned during Operation Blue Star, when the army had to be used, and that caused trouble in the army. There were mutinies and trouble in the army, and the army used very heavy weaponry. After that, a thought came up that you should set up a specialized counter-terrorist force. So that's how NSG was set up under a special act in 1986, and it had its first trial by fire, which it passed gloriously and very well in 1988 during Operation Black Thunder, the second operation in Amritsar, which was very non-controversial, not even 1% or 0.5% as controversial as Operation Blue Star was. And since then, you see that NSG or Black Cat Commandos are used for many major operations in the counter-terror area. For a long time, they were used for VIP security. And then finally, you have the SPG. You see all these people in shades around Prime Minister Modi, earlier around Gandhi family. SPG again came as a result of a crisis, and the crisis happened because Indira Gandhi was assassinated by her own guards. And then there was a need felt for a specialized force to protect the Prime Minister, and later it was extended to some others also, the Gandhi family, which has now been withdrawn. So SPG came up in 1985. SPG in fact was present when an attempt took place on Rahul Gandhi's life in 1986 on 2nd October at Rajghat, when a man called Karamjeet Singh fired some pellet shots from an improvised gun apparently at Rajiv Gandhi. He was caught, nobody was hurt. Second time there was an attempt on Rajiv Gandhi's life. It was, nobody fired at him, but that was on 30th of July 1987 in Sri Lanka. After he had signed the peace accord with Jayawardene, he was inspecting a guard of honor. A Sri Lankan naval rating picked up his rifle and struck Rajiv Gandhi with it. At that point, he did not have SPG with him. But if we see old pictures, old clips of that attack in Rajghat, you can see some people in black commandos uniform, taking their positions and firing with their submachine guns. You might ask me with good reason that I said that ITBP looks after all of the India-China border. That's its charter. So why do you need Assam Rifles? It used to be Assam Rifles in the east earlier. Now Assam Rifles charter is essentially internal security in the northeast, counterinsurgency, but also watching all of the India-Myanmar border. That's a very important responsibility because a lot of the Indian insurgents operate across the border from Myanmar. Now, Assam Rifles is almost like the army in the way it looks. It is the closest to being a paramilitary force. It's also officered by people on deputation from the army. It is headed also by a serving lieutenant general of the army. In fact, its headquarters is in Shillong, and I remember going there several times when I used to live in Shillong, covering the northeast, riding my motorbike through the most beautiful drive you can imagine into a place called Happy Valley on the outskirts of Shillong. I presume it is still there. It really, the name Happy Valley for that area is well deserved. And while we are running through the entire list, I know you also like exotica of military history or espionage history. So there is another of those which is not talked about very much and lately has completely fallen off the radar. That's called Special Frontier Force, SFF. Now SFF also was set up in 1963, just after, in the wake of the Chinese war. Again, this was B.N. Malik's idea, and the Americans were very involved because CIA and the US military were helping India rebuild their defensive capability vis-a-vis China at that point. So this unit was set up in Chakrata, beyond Mussoorie. A little center was set up, essentially then to train Tibetan guerrillas, Khampas and others to form some kind of a covert action force. In the course of time, it grew into a larger force, a multi-purpose, special purposes force, and it began to train also in Sarsawa in Saharanpur. It also was given then some air assets, so it could go quickly from one place to the other. In fact, one operation prominently where they got involved and suffered unfortunately some casualties was Operation Blue Star. They were the ones who carried out the first assault. And since you like some exotic of history, I will tell you that this was set up by a legendary general of Indian Army called Major General S.S. Uban, Sujan Singh Uban. Sujan Singh Uban was a decorated officer of the Second World War. He had won his military cross and he had headed a division numbered 22, 22nd Mountain. So SFF, while it was called SFF, for the longest time it came to be known as Establishment 22 or just as 22. Why? Because Major General Uban, its founder, was known as the commander of division number 22 in the Second World War. So this is the whole panoply, as I said, of India's paramilitary forces. They are very important. They cost a lot of money. There are a lot of people. There are also a lot of people carrying weapons. So at a time when we are thinking about the larger reform of India's armed forces, a larger reform and a synergization of functions among India's paramilitary forces is also needed.